The universe is a graveyard, and men like me are the ghouls who pick at the bones. For 10 years, my ship, the Vulture, had haunted the orbital debris fields from the Belt to the rings of Saturn, carving up the husks of dead cruisers and forgotten corporate frigates. War was good for business, and the corporate wars had been very, very good. We'd slice through armored hulls with plasma cutters, rip out the still valuable reactor cores and guidance systems, and sell them to whatever backwater colony was desperate enough not to ask where they came from. My name is Elias Thorne, and I was a master of deconstruction. I knew every rivet, every stress point, every flaw in the machines humanity used to kill itself. It was a dirty, quiet life spent in the cold dark, surrounded by the ghosts of other people's ambitions. The Vulture wasn't pretty. She was a patchwork beast of a salvage hauler, her hull scarred by micrometeoroids and scorched from 1,000 cutting jobs. But her engines were sound, her grappling arms were strong, and her crew was the best I'd ever worked with. Jada flew her like she was an extension of her own nervous system, her hands dancing over the controls with a practiced grace that defied the ship's ugly, utilitarian design. She never said much, but she didn't have to. We'd been breathing the same recycled air for so long we practically shared a mind. Then there was Corbin, our security man. A slab of muscle and cynicism with a face that looked like it had lost a fight with a grinder. He'd been a Marine in those same wars we now profited from, and he carried the weight of it in his eyes. He kept us safe from pirates and claim jumpers, and he trusted my gut more than I did. We were working the Titan Graveyard, a particularly dense field of wreckage from the Axiom Cygnus skirmishes. When the call came, it wasn't a standard distress signal. It wasn't anything I'd ever heard before. It was a tight beam whisper from the edge of the system, a Priority 1 dispatch from Axiom Corporation's private network, flagged for my ident code and my ident code only. Jada killed the external comms chatter, and the bridge of the Vulture went silent, save for the hum of the life support. The message played. It was a man I recognized. A corporate leech named Valerius, his face too smooth, his suit too sharp for the grit of deep space. He sat behind a desk of polished obsidian, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Elias Thorne, he began, his voice like oil on glass. I trust the salvage business is treating you well. Axiom has a unique opportunity for a man of your particular talents. A situation requiring discretion and a delicate touch. Our research outpost, Tenebris Station, in the Pluto sector, has gone dark. We require a diagnostic team to ascertain the cause and, if possible, retrieve the primary data core. I snorted. A diagnostic team. We're scrap haulers. Valerius, send the Navy. Valerius's smile didn't waver. The Navy has already quarantined the sector, which is precisely why we cannot involve them. Tenebris was a sensitive project. Its loss would be a significant financial inconvenience, but its discovery by the Unified Colonies government would be a catastrophe. We need someone who can slip through the blockade, someone expendable and deniable who knows how to take things apart. Corbin grunted from his station. He means us. I knew what Valerius was doing. He wasn't asking. 10 years ago, a job went bad. A reactor core I was supposed to be decommissioning on Ganymede went critical. The official report called it a tragic accident. The unofficial one, the one buried in Axiom's private servers, told a different story. A story of cut corners and faulty specs that I was paid handsomely to overlook. Valerius holding my file was the corporate equivalent of a gun to my head. "What's the payout?" I asked, my voice flat. "Full absolution," he said, and I felt the air leave my lungs. "Your Ganymede file, wiped clean. A complete and total pardon, plus a finder's fee of 10 million credits for the data core, enough to refit the Vulture into a palace and retire somewhere warm." The silence on the bridge was heavy. A clean slate. It was the one thing I couldn't salvage. The one ghost I couldn't exorcise. "And if we say no?" Jada asked, her voice quiet but edged with steel. Valerius's smile finally vanished. "Then I'm afraid the statute of limitations on industrial negligence might suddenly be revisited. It would be a shame for a man of Mr. Thorne's expertise to spend the rest of his life in a Martian penal colony." The message was clear. This wasn't a job offer, it was a leash. I looked at Jada, at Corbin. Their faces were grim. They'd stick with me. I knew that. To a penal colony, or to hell itself. Pluto was starting to look like the better option. "We'll need a specialist," I said, already feeling the gears in my mind turning, calculating risks, preparing for the worst. The Tenebris data stream went dead mid-transmission. The last packet was corrupted. It wasn't a power failure. We need someone who can make sense of it. Valerius seemed to have anticipated this. "We have already assigned a consultant to your mission, Dr. Eris Thorne. He is a leading xenolinguist and data theorist. He will be waiting for you at our transfer station on Iapetus." I froze. Eris. My brother. The brilliant academic who had disowned me after Ganymede. The one who saw me as nothing more than a glorified junkyard dog who had sold his soul. Valerius was not just tightening the leash, he was twisting the knife. This was his sick little joke, forcing the two estranged Thorne brothers to work together. It was perfect. Poetic cruelty. The journey to Iapetus was a cold, silent affair. We didn't talk about the job, about the coercion, about Eris. We just did our work. Jada plotted the looping trajectory that would keep us out of the main shipping lanes. Corbin ran a full diagnostic on our weapon systems, such as they were a single kinetic cannon meant for cracking asteroids and a suite of electronic countermeasures designed to fool pirates, not the colonial navy. I spent my time in the engine room, pushing the Vulture's aging reactor to its limits, trying to coax another few percentage points of efficiency out of the old girl. She'd need every bit of it to slip past a naval quarantine. Aris was waiting for us in a sterile Axiom docking bay, looking just as I remembered then, bookish, with eyes that held a universe of intellect and a galaxy of disapproval. He was dressed in a crisp Axiom Science Division uniform that was a shade too clean for the grime of the station. He carried a data slate and a look of profound disappointment. He nodded curtly at me, his gaze sweeping over the Vulture with thinly veiled disgust. "Elias," he said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "I was told I would be working with a professional salvage crew. Not this." Corbin shifted his weight, his hand resting near the butt of his sidearm. "Watch your mouth. Doc, this is the only thing keeping you from spacing yourself on the way to Pluto." Eris ignored him, his focus entirely on me. "Valerius said you were the only one who could do this." "I find that hard to believe." "Believe it," I said, my voice harder than I intended. "Get your gear." We launch in 20. The tension on the ship was thick enough to cut with a plasma torch. Eris set himself up in the small science station we had, a corner of the bridge usually reserved for analyzing material composition of salvaged wrecks. He barely spoke to any of us, his entire world shrinking to the corrupted data packet from Tenebrous Station. For days, he just stared at it, the impossible geometric patterns scrolling across his screen. Jada, with her usual quiet efficiency, navigated the long, dark stretch of space toward the outer system. She was a ghost at the helm, slipping us through the gaps in the naval patrol grids, using asteroid clusters and the magnetic shadow of Saturn to mask our approach. Corbin spent his time cleaning his rifle and watching Eris, his distrust for the academic a palpable force on the bridge. I stayed in my engine room, the only place the silence didn't feel like an accusation. On the 5th day, Aris finally spoke. "I have something," he said, his voice strained. We gathered around his console. The screen showed a waveform, a jagged, chaotic spike of audio extracted from the data packet. It was buried under layers of quantum encryption. It's not a message. It's a sound. He played it. The sound filled the bridge, a single, pure, resonant tone, like a massive tuning fork being struck. It was clean, perfect, and utterly unnerving. It vibrated in the fillings of my teeth, in the bones of my skull. It lasted for 10 seconds, and then it was followed by absolute, total silence. Not just the absence of noise, but a deadness, a void on the recording that my own ship's systems flagged as a data error. "That's it?" Corbin asked. "A doorbell, and then nothing." "Not nothing," Eris whispered, his eyes wide. "A perfect vacuum. The data indicates that after this sound, all background radiation, all quantum fluctuation, everything within the station's immediate vicinity ceased. It's not possible. It violates the fundamental laws of thermodynamics." He brought up another screen, showing the geometric patterns from the transmission. And these, they're not schematics. They're not language. They look like folding instructions. Instructions for how to fold space-time at a fundamental level. Before I could process what he was saying, Jada's voice cut through the tension. "Elias, you need to see this." On the main view screen, the distant star field was interrupted by a void, a patch of blackness where Pluto should be. The Navy quarantine was still in effect, a loose cordon of frigates miles out, but we were past them now, drifting in the silent dark. "Where's the station?" Corbin asked, peering at the screen. "My long-range sensors are picking up nothing. No heat, no energy, no debris field, just empty space." I pushed the Vulture's sensor suite to its maximum, feeding all available power into a deep-range scan. The results that came back were nonsensical. The system reported a mass anomaly consistent with a dwarf planet, but there was nothing there visually. It was a gravitational ghost. "Take us in, Jada," I said, my voice low, slow and steady, full stealth. "I want to know what the hell we're looking at." As we crept closer, the blackness resolved itself into a shape. It was a sphere, a perfect, featureless sphere of what looked like polished black crystal, easily 50 miles in diameter. It didn't reflect the distant light of the sun. It drank it. The star field behind it was not visible. The sphere was a hole in the universe. Tenebrous Station wasn't gone. It was inside that thing. The silence from the crew was absolute, a mixture of awe and primal terror. We were looking at something that shouldn't exist, something built by hands that did not know our physics. Suddenly, the Vulture shuddered. Red lights flashed on Jada's console. "Inertial dampeners are fluctuating," she said, her knuckles white on the controls. We've hit a gravity well, but it's not uniform. It's pulsing. Eris's face was pale, his eyes glued to his sensor readings. It's the sphere. He breathed. It's emitting a resonance, the same frequency as the sound from the recording. It's just below our audible range. It's not just gravity. It's warping the space around us. It's tuning it. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a weapon. This was something else entirely. We weren't salvagers coming to pick up a wreck. We were microbes crawling on the edge of a microscope slide, about to be examined. As if summoned by the thought, a sliver of the black sphere's surface seemed to peel away. It wasn't a hangar door opening. The material itself flowed and reformed, like liquid obsidian. From the darkness within, a vessel emerged. It was small, impossibly sleek, a sliver of darkness against the greater blackness of the sphere. It had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no windows. It moved with a silent, deliberate grace, not like a warship charging into battle, but like a scalpel being laid out for surgery. It wasn't racing toward us. It was simply approaching, its intent as cold, as clear, and as terrifying as the absolute zero of the void that separated us. We were not its enemy. We were its subject. And the diagnostic was about to begin. The bridge of the vulture was a tomb sealed with the kind of silence that precedes an execution. Every eye was fixed on the sliver of alien geometry gliding toward us through the void. It moved with an impossible smoothness, a predator that didn't need to hunt because its prey was already trapped. "Power up the cannon, Corbin," I ordered, my voice a low rasp. "But don't you dare lock on. Jada, keep us steady. Don't make any sudden moves." Corbin's thick fingers flew over his console, his expression grim. The low thrum of the kinetic cannon's capacitors charging was a pathetic, defiant growl in the face of the infinite. "Cannon is hot," he confirmed. "But Elias, what good is a rock thrower against that he didn't need to finish?" We all felt it. It was like bringing a knife to an apocalypse. My attention shifted to my brother. Aris stood frozen, his face a mask of academic terror and ecstatic discovery. His sensors were going haywire, trying to make sense of the vessel's energy signature, or rather, the lack of one. "It's not propelling itself," he murmured, more to himself than to us. "It's pulling space toward it. It's contracting the universe in front and expanding it behind. It's not flying through space. It's making space fly around it." Before I could translate that piece of theoretical madness into a practical threat, the attack came. But it wasn't a lance of plasma or a kinetic strike. It was a wave of something else. It passed through the vulture's hull as if it weren't there. For a split second, the lights on the bridge didn't just flicker, they changed color, shifting through a spectrum I'd never seen before, a cascade of impossible blues and searing, silent violets. The low hum of the ship's systems pitched up into a keening whine, and then, in my mind, I saw fire. Not the fire of an explosion, but the fire of creation. I saw star nurseries birthing suns, galaxies colliding in a slow cosmic dance. I saw the fundamental code of the universe laid bare, a tapestry of vibrating strings and quantum foam. And I felt a presence, a vast and ancient intelligence. Sifting through it all, it wasn't looking at me. It was looking through me, through every memory, every synapse, every shoddy weld on the vulture's hull. It was a diagnostic, an appraisal. It sorted through my knowledge of ship schematics, my memory of the Ganymede disaster, my fractured relationship with my brother, all with the detached curiosity of a mechanic checking a faulty engine. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. The lights snapped back to their normal, sickly yellow. The ship's systems settled into their usual grumble. Corbin was on one knee, shaking his head as if to clear water from his ears. Jada was slumped against her console, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Eris was clutching his data slate, his knuckles bone-white, his eyes wild with a terrifying understanding. It scanned us. He stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the alien vessel, which had now stopped a mere 1,000 yards from our viewport. It didn't just read our systems, it read us. It was looking for something. A dissonance. What Corbin growled, getting back to his feet. It's a pattern, Eris explained, his words tumbling out in a rush. The data from Tenebris, the sound, the sphere, it's all about harmony, resonance. It's searching for patterns that are out of tune with the baseline reality it has established. And it found one, not just in us, in our technology, in our history. He brought up an image on the main screen, a complex, fractal-like pattern of light. This is what it showed me. It's a representation of the data core from Tenebris Station. He zoomed in, and my stomach tightened. Embedded within the alien fractal was another pattern, smaller, cruder, but unmistakable. It was Axiom Corporation's data architecture. Tenebris wasn't just observing, I said, the pieces clicking into place with a sickening finality. They weren't studying this thing from a distance. They were trying to tap into it. They stole a piece of its language, its code, and tried to integrate it with their own systems. Aris nodded, his face grim. They didn't steal a piece of code. Elias, they captured a note from its song, a single, perfect harmonic, and in doing so, they created a cacophony, a fundamental wrongness. That's the dissonance. That's what this sphere came here to correct. It didn't destroy Tenebris Station. It edited it. It removed the flawed variable to restore the integrity of the equation. The cold dread that settled over me was heavier than any gravity well. We weren't a rescue mission anymore. We were accessories to the crime, tainted by the same flawed code that had doomed the station. Our ship, our minds, our very biology screamed of the same chaotic, dissonant humanity that Axiom had tried to merge with this perfect, alien harmony. We were the next variable to be erased. The alien ship did not move. Instead, a projection bloomed in the space before us. It wasn't a visual image, but a pure, geometric concept beamed directly into our minds. It was an instruction, an arrow, a path, leading from our ship to the opening in the sphere. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. It wants us to go inside, Jada whispered, her voice barely audible. A low thrum vibrated through the Vulture's deck plates. On the console, our engines flared red. "I've lost throttle control," she said, her professional calm finally cracking. "Something's got us. It's pulling us in." I watched as she fought it, her hands a blur over the controls, trying to fire thrusters, to divert power, to break us free. But it was like a rowboat caught in the current of a massive, silent river. The Vulture turned, slowly, inexorably, and began to drift toward the opening in the black sphere. We were being reeled in. "Corbin, stand down the cannon," I ordered. Everyone, get into your enviro suits. Now. We don't know what the atmosphere is like in there, or if there even is one. There was no argument, only the frantic scramble of survival. We suited up in silence. The hiss of oxygen and the click of helmet seals the only sounds on the bridge. I ran a quick systems check on my suit's comms. Jada, stay with the ship as long as you can. Keep the systems live. Corbin, you're with me and Eris. Standard exploration protocol. We stick together. No surprises. Corbin gave a grim nod, checking the action on his pulse rifle. No surprises. He repeated. Though we all knew it was a lie, the vulture passed through the threshold of the sphere, and, for a moment, reality dissolved. The transition wasn't like passing through a door. It was like being unwritten and then rewritten. The stars vanished. The void outside was replaced by a soft, internal luminescence that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the massive cavern we had entered. It was a docking bay, of a sort, but its scale was godlike. The ceiling was lost in a hazy distance, and the walls were not made of metal, but of a smooth, seamless material that shifted in color and texture. Our tiny salvage hauler was a dust mote in a cathedral. The tractor force gently set us down on a designated patch of the floor that seemed to flow into a perfect cradle for our ship's landing gear. Then, the force released us. A moment later, a pathway illuminated on the floor, a line of soft white light extending from our main airlock into the impossible distance of the alien chamber. Aris was staring at the wall, his suit's external sensors feeding data to his wrist-mounted slate. The material, it's not inert, he said, his voice crackling over the comm. It's computational. The entire structure is a single, massive processor. We're not in a ship. Elias, we're inside a mind. The thought was staggering. Axiom hadn't just poked a bear. They'd tried to steal a neuron from the brain of a god. We have to find the data core, I said, the words feeling utterly absurd even as I spoke them. Valerius and his pardon seemed like a concern from another lifetime. Now, it was about something more fundamental. That core, the piece of stolen data, was the source of the dissonance. It was the reason we were here. It was our only potential bargaining chip, and our death sentence. The data core is irrelevant, Aris countered, his tone sharp with a feverish intensity. Don't you see, we can't bargain with this thing. This is not a negotiation. It is a process of correction. Our only chance of survival is to understand that process. We need to communicate, to show it that we are not part of the flaw, that we can comprehend the harmony. And how the hell do we do that? Aris, I snapped back, my patience wearing thin. Sing it a song. Perhaps, he replied, with no hint of irony. The resonance, the patterns, the geometry, it's all a form of language, a language of pure physics. It's the most honest language in the universe, and I'm beginning to understand it. He looked from the illuminated path to me, his eyes burning with an intensity I hadn't seen since we were children arguing over the schematics of our father's star charts. For the first time, he wasn't looking at me with disapproval. He was looking at me with a desperate plea for trust. The gulf between us, the years of anger and resentment over Ganymede, suddenly seemed very small. Out here, in the mind of a cosmic intelligence, we were just two brothers, a long way from home. All right, Doctor, I said, clicking my rifle's mag into place. Let's go see if we can talk our way out of this. Corbin, take point. I want you ready to shoot at anything that isn't us. Corbin grunted his assent. And if the walls decide to think too hard at us, then shoot them. 2. I said. We cycled the airlock. The ramp of the Vulture lowered with a familiar hiss, touching down on the softly glowing floor of the alien structure. The air was breathable, according to our suit sensors, but thin and sterile, carrying a faint scent of ozone and something else, something I couldn't place, like the smell of a storm before it breaks. We stepped out, 3 insignificant human figures in a place of impossible scale and purpose. The illuminated path pulsed gently, expectantly. We had been summoned, appraised, and docked. The next stage of the diagnostic was about to begin, and our only hope was that my brother, the man who had spent his life talking to dead languages, could somehow find the right words to say to a living one. We took our first steps, our boots making no sound on the strange, yielding surface, following the light into the heart of the machine. The silence inside the sphere was a physical presence. It wasn't just the absence of noise. It was the absence of everything that made a human place feel alive. There was no hum of machinery, no distant echo, no whisper of recycled air. The light from the path on the floor did not cast shadows, and the vast, curving walls absorbed all sound, making our comm chatter feel like a sacrilegious intrusion. We moved like phantoms through the belly of the Leviathan, each step taking us deeper into its alien anatomy. The illuminated path was our only guide, a glowing thread leading us through a labyrinth of impossible scale. After what felt like an hour of walking, the single massive chamber gave way to a network of corridors. They were not hallways in any human sense. They were conduits, their walls flowing and shifting in slow, organic pulses of light, as if we were moving through the neural pathways of the structure's immense mind. The geometry is changing, Harris murmured over the comm, his attention fixed on his data slate. It's not random. It's responding to our presence. It's reconfiguring the architecture around us, creating a direct route. A route to where Corbin asked, his pulse rifle held tight against his shoulder, its tactical light cutting a useless swathe against the self-illuminated walls. To the source of the dissonance, Eris answered, to the tenebrous data core. It's leading us to the flaw. It wants us to see the corruption for ourselves. Why I pressed. Why not just vaporize us and be done with it? Because it's not a weapon. Elias, Oris said, a hint of frustration in his voice. Think of it as an immune system. We are foreign bodies, but we are also carriers of the infection it is trying to purge. Perhaps it cannot distinguish between the two. Or perhaps it is trying to teach us. The corridor opened into another chamber, this one smaller, though still large enough to hold a dozen ships the size of the Vulture. In the center of the room, floating in a gentle, pulsing field of light, was what we had come for. It was a chaotic mess. The sleek, perfect geometry of the sphere's interior was violated here by a jagged, ugly intrusion of human technology. The remains of tenebrous station shorn bulkheads, twisted girders, and shattered viewports were held in suspension, caught in the moment of their editing. And at the heart of the wreckage, impaled on a crystalline shard of the sphere's own making, was the Axiom data core. It was a standard corporate model, a hexagonal prism of armored plasteel, but it was wrong. Veins of the same black, crystalline material that formed the sphere had grown through it, pulsating with a sickly light. It looked like a tumor, a technological cancer. The pure, resonant hum of the sphere was absent here. Instead, the air vibrated with a discordant, grating frequency, a sound that felt like grinding glass in the back of my skull. It was the sound of two incompatible languages screaming at each other. "There it is," Corbin said, his voice flat. "The 10 million credit headache." "Jada, can you hear me?" I whispered into my comm. A burst of static was the only reply. We were too deep. The structure was blocking all signals. We were on our own. As we cautiously approached the floating wreckage, the nature of the editing became horrifyingly clear. The station hadn't been blown apart. It had been deconstructed, its component parts unwritten from reality with surgical precision. But the process hadn't been clean. Around the data core, space-time itself seemed to be frayed. I could see the ghostly after-images of the station's crew, translucent figures frozen in their last moments, one technician reaching for a console, another staring in horror at something just beyond our view. They weren't dead in the conventional sense. They were archived, echoes trapped in a corrupted file. This is the dissonance made manifest. Aris breathed, his academic curiosity warring with the obvious horror of the scene. Axiom's crude data architecture, forced into a quantum resonance with this perfect system. It's like trying to run a Stone Age algorithm on a quantum computer. The system is trying to correct the error, but the human code is too chaotic, too illogical. It's fighting back, creating this wound in reality. Suddenly, the discordant hum intensified. From the shadows of the floating debris, figures began to emerge. They were the station's security personnel, or what was left of them. Their bodies were horribly distorted, stretched and compressed by the spatial anomaly. Their Axiom security armor was fused with the black crystalline material of the sphere, their features twisted into masks of silent agony. They were no longer human. They were glitches, corrupted data given physical form, and they moved with a jerky, unnatural gait. Their purpose singular and terrifying. They were the sphere's antibodies, and we were the new infection. "Corbin, open fire," I yelled, raising my own rifle. Corbin didn't hesitate. His pulse rifle spat coherent bolts of light that slammed into the lead figure, blasting chunks of crystalline armor from its chest. But the creature didn't slow. It didn't feel pain. It was just a program executing a command: delete the error. I squeezed my trigger, my own shot stitching across the torso of another approaching glitch. It stumbled, its form flickering like a bad hologram, before continuing its relentless advance. This wasn't a firefight. It was pest control. And we were the pests. "Their forms are unstable," Aris shouted over the gunfire. "They're not entirely physical. Conventional ballistics are only partially effective. You got a better idea." "Genius," Corbin grunted, swapping out a spent energy cell. Aris was already at the edge of the floating debris field, his hands flying over his data slate, which he had jury-rigged with a proximity scanner. The data core is the source of the anomaly. It's anchoring them in our reality. If we can disrupt the connection, we might be able to destabilize them completely. "Disrupt it," how I yelled, kicking one of the creatures back as it swiped at me with an arm that had elongated into a jagged shard of black crystal. With a counter-resonance, Aris yelled back. He began tapping furiously at his slate. I can't replicate the sphere's frequency, but I might be able to create a feedback loop using the principles from Axiom's own pathetic code. It will be crude, chaotic, but it might be enough to temporarily sever their connection to the core. It was a mad plan, born of desperation and a profound understanding of two wildly different sciences, as Corbin and I fought a desperate, losing battle, laying down a wall of suppressing fire. Eris worked his own kind of magic. He wasn't a soldier, he was a conductor, trying to orchestrate a symphony of noise to drown out a perfect, deadly song. He held up his data slate, its screen glowing with a complex waveform. Now he screamed, a high-pitched, warbling shriek, the opposite of the Svar's pure tone, erupted from the slate's tiny speaker. It was the sound of digital chaos, a dial-up modem screaming in the heart of a cathedral. For a moment, nothing happened. The glitches continued their advance. Then, one of them began to flicker violently. Its crystalline armor cracked and dissolved into black dust. Its human form seemed to melt, its features sagging before it disintegrated into a shower of harmless, fading light. The effect cascaded through the others. One by one, the corrupted security personnel dissolved, their dissonant code finally overwhelmed by the sheer, meaningless noise Aris had unleashed. They were deleted. Silence, once again, descended on the chamber. Corbin was breathing heavily, his rifle still trained on the empty space where the last glitch had stood. What in the hell did you just do? Doc Aris was slumped against a piece of floating debris, his face pale with exertion. I spoke their language. He panted. I told them to divide by 0. My gaze was fixed on the data core, still pulsating at the center of the wreckage. The fight had bought us time. Nothing more. The sphere itself had not yet acted directly, but we had just proven ourselves to be an even more chaotic variable than the one it was trying to correct. We had to get that core. We had to finish this. I'm going for it, I said, holstering my rifle. I kicked off from the floor, my suit's thrusters firing in a controlled burst, propelling me through the zero-gravity debris field. The spatial distortions around the core were nauseating. The world seemed to bend and twist around me, and the ghostly images of the tenebrous crew flickered in my peripheral vision, their silent screams echoing in the back of my mind. I reached the core, my magnetic boots clanking onto the twisted plasteel frame of the station. The crystal veins growing through the core pulsed with a malevolent energy, and the grating hum intensified, vibrating through my bones. My suit's gauntlets were equipped with microplasma cutters, designed for salvage. They were crude tools for such a delicate operation. As I prepared to make the first cut, to sever the core from the wreckage, a new presence entered the chamber. It didn't walk or fly. It simply arrived. It was a single, elegant figure, composed of the same flowing, obsidian material as the sphere itself. It was humanoid in shape but lacked any discernible features, no face, no eyes, no mouth. It was a perfect, androgynous form, a living sculpture of pure intent. It carried no weapons. It didn't need to. It was an avatar of the sphere's consciousness, a direct manifestation of its will. It stood on the floor below, its featureless head tilted up at me, and I felt its appraisal not as a thought or a sound, but as a cold, irrefutable certainty in the pit of my stomach. It had allowed us to deal with the glitches, the minor errors in the system, but now I was tampering with the source code. My hand hesitated over the plasma cutter. This new entity wasn't an antibody. It was the surgeon, and it had come to excise the tumor, along with anyone who happened to be holding the scalpel. The avatar of the sphere regarded me with an unnerving stillness, its blank, featureless face a canvas onto which my own fear projected 1,000 different threats. It didn't move. It didn't radiate heat or energy, yet its presence was an overwhelming weight, a gravitational pull on my very soul. This was not a monster to be fought. It was a conclusion to be reached. "Elias, get out of there." Corbin's voice crackled in my comm, tight with alarm. "That thing is not our friend." I ignored him. My focus locked on the silent figure below. My hand, poised over the plasma cutter's ignition, trembled. This was the moment of truth. Valerius and his pardon, Axiom and its corporate sins, they were all distant echoes. Here, now. It was just me, the corrupted heart of a human machine, and the entity that had come to correct the error. Then, a different voice cut through my comms, calm and analytical. "Don't cut it. Elias, it's a trap." It was Eris. He had pushed off from the debris field and was now floating a few yards away. His data slate clutched in his hands like a holy text. "What are you talking about?" "Eris," I demanded. "This core is the problem. We take it out. We might have a bargaining chip. You're still thinking like a salvager," he retorted, his voice sharp with urgency. "You see a problem, and you want to rip it out, but you're not seeing the whole machine. Look at the energy patterns." He projected a holographic display from his slate, overlaying a shimmering complex web of light onto the wreckage. Lines of pure, harmonious energy flowed from the sphere's walls, converging on the data core. But where they met the Axiom hardware, the lines became a chaotic, tangled mess, a knot of discordant light. "The sphere isn't just holding the station in stasis," Aris explained. "It's performing an analysis. It's trying to understand the dissonance, to untangle the flawed logic of the human code from its own. But it can't. Our technology, our very way of thinking, is fundamentally incompatible with its own. It's like a perfect musician trying to understand a child banging on a broken piano." The avatar on the floor below raised one slender, featureless arm, pointing a single finger directly at me. It wasn't an accusation. It was an identification. It had identified me as the primary agent of chaos, the one actively trying to manipulate the flawed component. "If you cut that core free, you're not salvaging it," Eris said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You'll be validating its conclusion that the only way to fix the error is to delete the entire equation, the core, the station, and us along with it. The moment you apply a crude tool, like a plasma cutter, to that quantum-level problem, it will classify you as part of the corruption, and it will edit you." My blood ran cold. He was right. Every instinct I had, honed by a decade of taking things apart, was wrong here. My strength was my weakness. I was the hammer. And this was a problem that couldn't be solved by brute force. "So, what do we do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We talk to it," Aris said, a strange, fierce light in his eyes. "We show it we can learn. We show it we can understand the music." He turned his attention from me to the silent avatar below. "Corbin," he said into his comm, his voice steady. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to trust me. I trust Elias." Corbin's gruff voice replied, "And he seems to be listening to you. So for now, you've got my attention." "Good," Eris said, "on my slate. I have the original waveform from the Tenebris recording, the pure resonant tone. I'm going to broadcast it, but I'm going to modulate it. Introduce a slight imperfection, a single, deliberate off-key note. You want to piss it off even more, Corbin growled. No, Aris said. I'm going to introduce a flaw that I can then correct. I'm going to show it that we are not just chaos. We are capable of recognizing our own dissonance. We are capable of harmony. It was the single most insane, beautiful, and terrifying idea I had ever heard. It was a plan that could only have been born in the mind of a man who saw the universe not as a collection of objects, but as a symphony of ideas. I slowly, deliberately, pulled my hand away from the plasma cutter and holstered the tool. I turned my body to face the avatar, showing it my empty hands. It was a gesture of surrender, a sign that I was willing to listen. Eris took a deep breath. Broadcasting now. A low, resonant hum filled the chamber, the same pure tone we had heard on the Vulture. It vibrated through the deck plates, through the bones of my skull. It was a sound of perfect order. Then, a second tone was introduced, a fraction of a step too sharp. It was a tiny, barely perceptible flaw, but in the sterile perfection of the sphere, it was as jarring as a scream. The avatar reacted. Its smooth, obsidian form seemed to ripple, and the ambient light in the chamber flickered. The discordant hum from the axiom core grew louder, angrier. The entity was focusing on this new, deliberate error. It was confused. Then, as quickly as he had introduced it, Eris corrected the flaw. The sharp note resolved back into the pure, perfect hum. He held the single, clean tone for a few seconds, and then let it fade into silence. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. The avatar remained motionless. The chamber was utterly quiet. I held my breath. Every muscle in my body tensed. We had made our plea. We had offered our proof of concept. The silence was its verdict. Finally, the avatar lowered its arm. A new illuminated path, identical to the one that had led us from our ship, materialized on the floor, extending from the feet of the avatar to the base of the floating wreckage. It was an invitation. It understood. Aris whispered, his voice filled with a profound, trembling awe. It's inviting us to collaborate. Slowly, my thrusters firing in gentle puffs. I descended from the wreckage and landed softly on the floor next to Eris and a very bewildered-looking Corbin. We stood before the silent figure, three flawed, chaotic humans in the presence of a perfect, alien intelligence. The avatar turned and glided toward the wreckage, its movements as smooth as flowing water. It stopped at the edge of the debris field and gestured toward the corrupted axiom core. A new set of instructions appeared in our minds, not as language, but as pure, intuitive concepts. It was a schematic, a plan. It wasn't a plan for removal. It was a plan for integration. The sphere couldn't untangle the chaotic human code, so it was offering us a way to translate it. It wanted us to interface with the core, to act as the bridge between the two incompatible systems. It wanted Eris's understanding of its resonant language and my practical and physical knowledge of how the human machine was built. It wants us to fix it, I said, the scale of the request settling on me. It wants us to teach its immune system how to recognize and safely neutralize the axiom infection without destroying the host. It's more than that, Aris corrected gently. It's offering a synthesis, a new form of language, a bridge between its logic and ours. This is This is the discovery of a lifetime. My mind reeled. The pardon, the 10 million credits, they had all been bait in a trap set by a petty corporate tyrant. But that trap had led us here, to a moment of first contact that would redefine humanity's place in the universe. But there was a catch. The mental schematic was clear. The process would require a direct neural interface from a human operator. Someone had to plug their own mind into the axiom core and, guided by the sphere's consciousness, manually rewrite the corrupted data from the inside. It would be like performing brain surgery on a god, with your own consciousness as the scalpel. The feedback, the sheer volume of information, the alienness of it all. It would be unsurvivable. One of us would have to make the ultimate sacrifice, not just dying, but having their very consciousness unwritten in the process of creating this new, unified language. The avatar's featureless face turned, shifting its attention from Eris, the linguist, to me, the mechanic. It knew. It understood that to fix a machine, you needed someone who wasn't afraid to get their hands dirty, someone who knew, intimately, how things break. It was asking for a salvager. I looked at my brother Asana, and for the first time in a decade, the anger and the resentment were gone, replaced by a strange, quiet understanding. Ganymede had been my greatest failure, a disaster born of my willingness to cut corners, to accept a flawed design for profit. It had shattered my career and my family. But every lesson I had learned from that failure, every schematic I had memorized, every broken machine I had taken apart and put back together since. It had all been practice for this. This was my chance to salvage something more important than a wrecked ship. It was a chance to salvage the future. I gave Eris a small, sad smile. Looks like I've got one last job to do. I turned to the avatar and gave a single, decisive nod. I accept. The path to the core pulsed, waiting for me. No. Corbin's voice was a low growl, a sound of pure, helpless defiance. He took a half step forward, his rifle rising slightly as if he could somehow shoot his way out of a philosophical dilemma. Elias, don't be a damn fool. We'll find another way. I kept my back to him, my eyes fixed on the path that pulsed with a soft, final invitation. There is no other way. Corbin, you saw the glitches. You heard the noise. This thing will keep editing until the error is gone. That means us. That means Earth. Eventually, this is the only solution on the table. I turned my head slightly, meeting his gaze. Besides, this is what I do. I take apart broken things. I then looked to my brother. Aris stood beside me, his face a portrait of grief and profound, world-altering understanding. The years of animosity between us had evaporated, burned away by the gravity of this moment, leaving only the simple, painful truth of our brotherhood. He knew what this sacrifice meant, not just for me, but for everything that would come after. Ganymede. I started, the word feeling heavy and ancient. I'm sorry. Eris. I was a coward. I took the money because it was easier than admitting I'd failed. He shook his head, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. You didn't fail. Elias. You just created a dissonance. We all do. It's what it means to be human. He reached out, not touching me, but holding his hand in the space between us. You're not just taking something apart. You're building something new. The first word in a new language. Your voice will be the first. The weight of his words settled on me, not as a burden, but as a purpose. I finally understood. My life wasn't a series of failures. It was a long, chaotic apprenticeship for this one perfect, final act of salvage. I clapped Corbin on the shoulder, a firm, final gesture of camaraderie. Get him home, Corbin and Jada. You get them home. I gave a last, grim smile. Tell Valerius. I finally fixed something. Without another word, I walked the illuminated path. The Avatar stood aside, a silent usher. As I approached the floating wreckage, a single delicate tendril of black crystal extended from the axiom core, its tip glowing with a soft white light. It was a port, an invitation to plug in. I reached out, my gloved hand steady, and placed my palm against it. The universe ended, and then it was remade. It was not pain. Pain is a signal, a warning from a nervous system. This was a direct, unfiltered torrent of pure information. My consciousness was ripped from my body and thrown into a maelstrom of screaming, chaotic data. I was inside the core, and it was a universe of broken engines. Axiom's code was a nightmare of shoddy construction, redundant subroutines looping into infinity, security protocols fighting each other, memory leaks bleeding raw data into fractal voids. It was the digital ghost of corporate greed and human arrogance, and it was screaming. And through the chaos, I could feel the other presence, the sphere. It was a silent, perfect pressure, a vast and patient intelligence watching from the outside, unable to touch the madness directly. It was order, and this was chaos. I was the bridge. I was the translator. I didn't think in code. I thought in mechanics. I saw the looping subroutines not as flawed algorithms, but as jammed gears. I didn't rewrite them. I forced them into alignment, my will serving as the crowbar. I saw the memory leaks as ruptured conduits, and I used the memory of my own failures, the scorched taste of Ganymede's air, the look on Aris's face to patch the holes, to cauterize the wounds in the machine. My life became the raw material for the repair. My memory of Jada's hands effortlessly guiding the vulture through a debris field became the basis for a new, elegant data sorting protocol. Corbin's unshakable loyalty was forged into a new security paradigm, one built on trust instead of suspicion. The long, silent years I'd spent tracing the lines of dead ships, learning their secrets, became a library, a reference for this new, synthesized language. And my relationship with Eris, our arguments over star charts as boys, the bitter silence of our estrangement, and the final, quiet understanding in this chamber that became the grammar. It was the structure of dissonance and resolution, of question and answer, of two disparate ideas finding a way to exist in the same space. I was dissolving. My name, my face, my history, they were being unwritten, their meaning transferred from the personal to the universal. I was no longer Elias Thorne, salvager. I was becoming a concept, the bridge between the flawed and the perfect. It was an agony and an ecstasy, a death and a birth, all at once. My last coherent thought was not of fear, but of peace. The dissonance was resolving. The screaming was fading. The machine was being fixed. From the outside, Eris and Corbin watched in stunned silence. The grating hum from the core softened, the chaotic light within it stabilizing, the violent, jagged pulses smoothed out into a steady, complex, and beautiful rhythm. The tangled knot of energy Eris had shown them was being untangled, rewoven into a new, intricate tapestry of light. The wreckage of Tenebrous Station, its purpose served, began to gently dissolve, its atoms breaking down into a soft, shimmering dust that was absorbed back into the floor. Elias's body, still connected to the core, went limp, his helmeted head slumping forward. The crystalline tendril retracted, and the data core, now glowing with a pure, steady light, floated free. It was no longer a tumor. It was a seed. The avatar watched the process complete. Then, it turned its featureless face to Eris and Corbin and gave a single, slow nod. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, of gratitude, of completion. A new path illuminated on the floor, leading from their position back toward the distant shape of the vulture. Their summons was over. Their collaboration was complete. Corbin was the first to move. He slung his rifle and strode forward, grabbing Elias's lifeless body and pulling it free from the stasis field. He held his friend, a man he had followed to the edge of the system, and felt the profound, empty silence of his absence. Eris stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the transformed data core, tears streaming down his face. He was witnessing the birth of a new Bible, and its first prophet was his brother. Eris, we have to go. Corbin's voice was thick with grief, but steady. We have to go now. He half carried, half dragged Eris away from the center of the chamber, Elias's body slung over his other shoulder. They followed the light, a long, silent funeral procession through the mind of a god. When they reached the vulture, the ramp was already open, and Jada's voice, a lifeline back to the human world, crackled over the comm. I've got you. Get aboard. I'm reading. Something out here. The sphere is changing. They laid Elias's body down on the bridge, a silent testament to the price of their survival. Jada didn't need to ask. She saw it in their faces. With a quiet, steely resolve, she sealed the airlock and lifted the vulture from its cradle. As they passed through the threshold of the sphere, reality rewrote itself once more. The soft inner luminescence was replaced by the familiar, comforting star field. The sphere behind them was once again a perfect, featureless orb of absolute black, a hole in the universe. But it no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a monument. In the quiet of the bridge, Eris sat at his science station. He had the transformed core. It wasn't the physical object. Valerius would never see his prize. Instead, its new language had been downloaded, transferred into his data slate during the final moments of synthesis. On the screen, it flowed not as code, but as a living, breathing geometric pattern, a river of light that was infinitely complex and perfectly harmonious. And woven into its structure, he could feel the echoes of his brother, his stubbornness, his ingenuity, his final, profound act of grace. The universe is a graveyard, and men like Elias Thorne are the ghouls who pick at the bones. But on that day, in the cold, silent dark past Pluto, a salvager did more than pick at a wreck. He became the architect of a bridge. He didn't just fix a broken machine. He taught two universes how to speak to one another. His name would never be etched on a memorial, his sacrifice never known to the worlds he had saved. But his voice, the first word in a new cosmic language, would echo in the silent spaces between stars, a permanent, perfect harmony born from a flawed and beautiful human soul. The vulture turned for home, no longer a scrap hauler, but an ark, carrying a new covenant into the future.